Welcome to the SIWIKE Podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SIWIKE Podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here with one of our new guest hosts, Valerie, who comes to us with a background in career development. So how are you doing today, Valerie?
Hey, Lukey. I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. So we'll get you to introduce yourself a little bit and what you're doing now, and then we'll kind of reel back in time and talk about what you were like as a kid. So what are you up to these days? What are you up to nowadays, Valerie?
Okay, so nowadays I am a career development practitioner. I've been in the field since 2018. I am also known as Valerie Career Confidence Coach, and I specifically focus on helping youth and young adults who may be experiencing challenges with periods of transition, move through that. And I love helping them to really hone their confidence by owning and honing their true strengths, skills, talents, and zones of genius. So they can, see who they truly are and help them move forward in the direction of their dream careers. And much of what I do is because I also experienced very challenging periods of transition and lots of confusion with my own career. So that's what really prompted me to get in the direction of career development.
Sounds good. Very useful and very important role that you have. So I'd like if we can rewind a little bit and ask a little bit about what was Valerie like as a kid? What are some early fond memories growing up? What were you like as a kid?
Okay. So growing up, I remember really loving learning. Learning was always a part of my life then. So I remember when I was little, my family went on a vacation to Mexico. I took a book with me, but not just any book. It was probably from the 1950s or 1960s. My dad had a lot of old books, and it was a small science textbook. So I was that 6-year-old kid on the plane reading a small science textbook as my reading material as we flew down to Mexico. And so that's one of my earliest memories is I always had books. I'm very grateful that my parents, especially my dad, who also loves learning and reading, instilled that love of learning within me. We were always going to the libraries. I remember writing gibberish on my different, on my toys, probably on the walls too. So reading, writing, learning, storytelling, watching VHS tapes. About different stories or about science, how the world worked was always a part of my life from a very young age.
Yeah. For those that don't know what VHS is, it was prior to DVDs and prior to CDs, and then before they streamed all that sort of stuff. So it used to be how we consumed our video content and things like that. So that sounds amazing. If you don't mind sharing a little bit more about kind of being that I guess it's a bookish kid. So you were at the library a lot, you were reading a lot, and and does that mean you kind of kept to yourself? You were like the shy, quiet one, or did you have like tons of friends and you were hanging around with folks? Tell us a little bit more about that.
A little bit of both. I think I've always been on the more quiet, introspective side, but I also had, school friends as well. I remember in grade 2, I decided to create a spring club with my friends to celebrate the springtime, and I designed how it was going to go down, design the sign. It's going to take place in my backyard on my plastic lawn chairs. Although it never went down, I already had that type of ideation to bring people together at an early age.
Cool. And do you have a thought in your head in terms of why didn't that happen, and how did that thought get in your head to do something like that?
It was a long time ago, so I can't really remember how exactly it got into my head, but I think I just had that desire to be in this type of leadership position, to direct, to guide, and create something where people will come together, something of my own. Yeah, I think I just had that creative streak.
That sounds good. So books, trying to become a leader and trying to bring people together. And then how did that translate into kind of school and your eventual future career? So were you pretty good at school? I would imagine bookish kids are pretty good. And then how did that translate to kind of your subsequent degree and areas of study?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I think I was a pretty decent student. I remember my favorite subjects in school, like middle school and definitely in high school, because what I studied then led me to what I ended up studying in university. My favorite classes when I was in high school were definitely like English, literature, history, world issues. So all about like, the humanities. English because we'd read lots of books and were able to analyze aspects of humanity through them. And then world issues because I was very passionate about making a difference in the world. And so I actually went on to study English literature as my major in university. I actually ended up changing majors halfway through my degree. But that's how I started off because I really admired my teachers in high school and I wanted to be like them. I wanted to inspire the youths, teach them, critical thinking, help encourage them. And so off I went to university studying English Lit, which is no surprise considering I was that bookish kid, loved storytelling when I was little.
Yeah. I love how you talk a little bit about that transition because sometimes people go in and say, hey, I started this thing, I got to finish it versus they're a little bit more hesitant to like make changes in their degrees. If you could walk us through that process. That'd be
Sure. So I'll take you a little bit more back in time as well. And this also leads to what I do now as a career development practitioner. Growing up, I am from not an immigrant background, but a refugee background. My parents were, if you remember, back in the 70s and 80s, the huge influx of refugees from the Vietnam War. My parents were the boat people who escaped very treacherously and were able to come to Canada and start their lives over. And so growing up, it was a very small insular community. And, oftentimes coming from that traditional Asian background, your parents, I'm sure you could finish my sentence. Your parents want you to be one of three things: the doctor, lawyer, or engineer.
So I usually do four.
Okay.
Doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer, right? So the accountant snuck its way in there too.
My mom was actually an accountant as well, now retired. So something responsible like that. So, I didn't really have a lot of career role models growing up. It was just, having that traditional Asian background, small insular community, didn't have a lot of guidance. And so, taking it back to what I studied in university, in grade 12, it was time to apply for university. And actually teaching was one of the things that my parents approved of as well. And obviously I liked too. So I decided to study English literature when I got to university, thinking, okay, this is going to lead into going to teachers college without knowing, what teachers college is like, without knowing the path. Although I had my teachers in high school, like I didn't know what the career roadmap would look like. But I went in thinking, okay, I'll figure it out. Yeah. Which transitioned later to changing my major to women and gender studies.
Right. So what was that process like? Because obviously, well, I'm not sure, obviously. Like, does that continue or necessitate that you continue down the teaching path, or was there a different career path that you sought for switching into women's studies?
So not necessarily at the time when I changed my majors. I didn't know like what it was going to lead to, but I knew that I was really over studying English literature. I literally studied it for 3 years, and then I started taking some like old English literature because that was one of the requirements to complete a English major degree. And I realized, I do not care about this. And I actually started taking some classes in women and gender studies. And even when I was taking English literature, I was taking stuff like post-colonial studies. So it was all very like social justice related. And I realized, I'm so much more passionate about this. And so that's when I decided to change majors over. Of course, again, not knowing at the time what career path it was going to lead to, but I decided to go with it because it was so much more interesting to me. And later down the line, it does work. It worked itself out because I now work with a very diverse population. So my studies in women gender studies really, really helped me, to understand the systemic barriers and that people face.
Sure. And so now you've switched into women's studies and you're like approaching graduation and now it's looming like, well, what do I do next? So what was that process like for you?
That's another process. So all throughout university, I did not receive any career guidance. Like I went to the career center once. I think I got overwhelmed and stepped out, but it never really occurred to me to use career services. And I didn't really know about career guidance, counseling, or coaching. I always was just in the mindset, okay, I'll figure it out. And because I lacked that career guidance, it took me a long time to get to where I am now, but everything happens for a reason, they say. So actually, after I finished my degree, which actually took me 6 years because I was literally in my third year when I changed majors, completely walked away from my English major and changed to women gender studies. Ended up going part-time as well. And, worked in retail at the same time as going to school. I actually entered studies for homeopathy at the Canadian College of Homeopathic Medicine after I graduated from the University of Toronto, and I studied that for 1 year. Initially thinking, okay, I'm going to go become a homeopathic physician, but I decided I wasn't sure about that, and just did 1 year of that, and then after that, I was just trying to figure myself out.
Sounds good. And during that process to figure yourself out, so you've now graduated and you have this homeopathic medicine diploma, but you're not sure that you want to go down that route. And then you ultimately go abroad and start teaching English. Was that planned, or was that something on a whim? Or tell us more about that process.
Well, so I left the homeopathy school after 1 year, and I just continued to work in the same retail job I had been in since I was in university. I was in sales. I was an eyewear consultant. Did very well in sales, top 25 in North America, President's Club. But I knew I didn't belong there either. And I knew I needed to move on, but I didn't know how to. Until one fateful day, I met a very dear friend that I went to university with, and she was actually studying her TEFL or TESL to teach ESL. She was taking it at the University of Toronto, and she was actually teaching adults English, and she was telling me how much she enjoys it and that she never thought she would find something so enjoyable. And she also talked to me about this opportunity she heard about to take the TEFL, teaching English as a foreign language, and going abroad to South Korea to teach English. So at that time, when I had met with her that fateful day, I was, thinking about my future. I knew I wanted to make a move on. I didn't know how. And I also always wanted to go abroad. Never had the chance to do that in undergrad, and I always wanted to travel. So when I heard about this opportunity, I was like, okay, this could be something. So that's how I ended up taking the leap of faith and going to South Korea.
Sounds great. And during that path, what are the conversations with mom and dad? Obviously, you didn't do the doctor, lawyer, engineer one, and you decide to switch your studies, and now you don't know what you're doing. Now you want to go abroad and teach in Korea. So can you describe that conversation a little bit?
Well, the conversation didn't happen till a lot later. So I decided when I actually went to the information session for the TEFL certification, I had that really strong inner gut pull, and I did not let myself back down. So I actually put my money down right there, my credit card, and I paid for the course, and I decided, okay, I'm going to take this later in the summer, which I ended up doing. And so I actually didn't end up telling them until I didn't tell them the night before I was about to leave, but I waited until after I had completed the course, and when I was in the middle of applying for jobs and interviewing, that's when I told them, this is what I'm thinking of doing. And so I think at first they had their hesitations as parents, it's so far, why don't you go somewhere else in Canada? But I knew, especially as a young person at the time, I was in my 20s, it would be this was the time for me to take that chance on myself and that leap of faith. Right. And I knew that it would be an amazing opportunity, which it was.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
And how was the opportunity? Did it meet expectations, exceed expectations, totally missed expectations, something like that?
Oh, gosh. Okay. So, wow. It was such an amazing journey, even preparing for it, getting the guidance for it. creating the vision board for it. I even had a theme song going for it. One of my favorite Disney movies growing up was Hercules. So I don't know if you know the song. I think Michael Bolton did a rendition of it called Go the Distance.
Okay.
That became my theme song. So I spent a lot of time, preparing mentally, emotionally for this. And I even hired a holistic health coach to help me in the months prior, to get all healthy and ready for this big chapter of my life. And so the day came, flew over to Korea by myself, not knowing anyone there, not knowing the language, not knowing the people, never living away from home before. Not knowing the culture, never having taught before, but having that strong pull and that desire to go. So when I went, we landed, we met other amazing teachers to be. It was an amazing orientation, started teaching, and then the honeymoon phase wore off about 2 weeks later.
Okay. Well, you got to continue the story. What happened as part of that?
Well, I was very idealistic. I was like, yes, I'm going to go. I'm going to change these kids' lives. And I think a lot of us being young people, we are very idealistic. And actually, that's a good thing because it does make us more courageous to go do things that are way outside of our comfort zone. And so having not worked, I've never done it before, right? And I think that's where we have to give ourselves a lot of grace as we experience these really challenging things that we have never, ever done before, right? So the experience, turned out very quickly tougher than I had anticipated. Well, I think I knew that there was going to be some challenges involved, but I didn't know how challenging it would be. So it was a very tough working environment. It's just a very different culture there. And I was away from home for the first time. So that was huge, right? I really grew up a lot there. Had my own place for the first time, had to learn how to navigate a different culture, different language, and working my first full-time big girl job with a lot of deadlines and responsibilities. So I had to learn fast, and I had to adapt fast in an environment that was very challenging to adapt to.
Sounds good. Mm-hmm. And obviously you're not in Korea right now, so you're back here in Toronto. Yep. So walk us through kind of the journey back to Canada. And
big journey. Oh, okay. All right. So I was in Korea from 2015 to 2017. Aside from a stint between during the winter holidays, I was honestly so exhausted. I actually took like my last $900 and flew home just for 10 days. Just to come home, see family, because I was just so exhausted. And it was very, very tough. I understand why people do what we call over there the midnight run, right? Okay. Which is when a foreign teacher kind of leaves in the middle of the night, not saying anything. They basically ghost the school that they're working at to avoid fees. And when I started working there, I understood wow, it's very tough. Sometimes people do end up making the decision to leave. And although it was very tough for me, and maybe I could have done the same, but for me, it was not an option. I was really determined to see it through and go and finish that second year contract that I had. So I did it. And it was very challenging. It was very tough. It really tested my limits and my belief in myself. But I did it. I finished my second contract there, and I was preparing to do what most English teachers do there after they finish their contracts, which is travel and backpack throughout Asia. Right. However, unfortunately, very, very sad news on the home front came about. My grandfather, who I talked to more than I talked to my parents. Unfortunately, he was in the last stages of life. So I found out he was in palliative. Many years before, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And so I found out when I was, thankfully, speaking of divine timing, thankfully at the time I was still in Korea. And I was, I had my ticket. I was going to go to Okinawa, always wanted to go there. But thankfully, I was still in Korea at the time. And so I made the decision to forfeit those tickets and come home.
Hmm.
And so I must have bought a ticket on like a Sunday and I left on a Tuesday.
Okay.
And that was tough. I was coming home after living on my own for 2 years, totally not wanting to come home, totally enjoying my independence and freedom abroad, and desiring to continue that time in Asia traveling. But I decided to come home because I didn't know how much time he had left. And thankfully, I was able to come home and spend the last month of his life with him by his side. And it was just really a blessing and such a special, intimate time that we were able to spend together in his last days. So I'm really grateful for that. Of course, that was also very difficult. As I said, I talked to him more than I talked to my parents abroad. So we had that close bond. And so to come from such a huge life experience, and exhausting one too, straight into another exhausting grief-filled situation was also very challenging.
So sorry for your loss, and I'm sure it was
Thank you.
good that you were able to spend that time with him. And as kind of life moves on, how did you make the decision to stumble into? Maybe there was another friend that kind of had a serendipitous event to get into career development. How did that happen?
All right. Well, how that happened was it was a long period of time before that actually came about. So as I mentioned, my experience in Korea was tremendous. It was life-changing, but it was also extremely exhausting. I was super burned out. To be honest, my mental health there was not good. It was probably the worst it had been one of the worst that it's been in my whole life as a young person. And so I really needed a lot of time to recover from that. And I think every major experience and transition we go through in life, and we will go through many in life, we need that time in that space to allow ourselves that grace as we move from one place to another. And so I realized that was what I needed. Of course, I've been working since I was 18. I never not worked for like more than a couple months at a time. I've always had like steady employment. So when I found myself lost, burned out, and jobless, I started, I was kind of, freaking out, really hesitant, but thankfully, friends calmed me down and reminded me, okay, Val, you just got back from this tremendous experience. I went back to live at home with my parents as well. So that was another thing, going from having my own place abroad with lots of freedom, coming back to, family dynamics.
Sure.
That was challenging too. And also, just losing my grandfather. All of that, really warranted some downtime. So thankfully friends called me down and reminded me of that. And so I actually realized I needed rest, and that's what prompted me to just rest and recover. So for a period of a whole year, that's what I did. And, I had a lot of noise from the outside. Parents starting to get concerned. They're seeing that I'm not working, I'm at home. People telling me, Val, just get a job, any job. But I really knew that I didn't want to get just any job. Plus, I was recovering mentally. I would say it was a traumatic experience in many ways. Like, I wasn't like officially diagnosed with like PTSD, but I think I had a lot of symptoms of it. And I just needed that time to recover. And aside from the fun employment vacation that I took, hit the West Coast, visited some friends in Hawaii. I needed that 1 year to rest and recover. And once I started to feel better, it literally was like, I left in March 2017. It wasn't until like maybe February, March 2018. When I just had a moment, I realized, I'm like, I think I'm okay. These things. So I just want to encourage everybody listening, if you have gone through something similar and you have been burned out to a crisp, right? It's okay to rest. We go through different seasons of our lives, right? And sometimes you need to be in that little cocoon. So, and it's giving myself that time and space and the grace, and to be in that protective cocoon space is actually what allowed me to move forward in the next phase of my life and career, which is where the career development comes in.
Sounds good. Yeah. So if you want to talk a little bit about that transition into career development and to where you are now.
Sure. Wow. When I look back, it's so incredible how things turned out. And I think that's what really can happen when you trust the process. And that's actually the name of my first public talk, aside from, the speech that I gave at my grandfather's funeral. Just give me a moment because it was such a tremendous journey. So it literally took me like a year after leaving Korea to realize I think I'm okay now. And so with that, I started to engage in the community again. I started going out there, started going to workshops and, taking advantage of all the amazing free resources that we have in the city of Toronto that we both live in. And I started attending events that were geared towards youth. And it was one particular event that was held at City Hall called If I Ruled TO. And it was a gathering of youth from across the city who really wanted to make a difference. And it was there that I realized connecting with other youth who were similar minded and really want to make a difference in the community. I remember that's what I was passionate about. And it was also at the event that there was many booths for services in the community. And that's where I met, and I didn't know at the time, would be my future employer and what would launch this whole new career into career development. So I signed up for services at a nonprofit employment center, and they matched me with an amazing employment advisor because I knew at the time I wanted to work and I needed to work, but I didn't want just any job. I was getting a little older at the point and I knew I wanted a career. And so I just trusted that pull, and it led me to a whole career in career development. Kind of accidentally, but as we know, there's no coincidences.
Sounds good. So it seems like there's a lot of these serendipitous moments that
serendipitous
happen to change your life, and as you said, to trust the process. And as you continue on, things will present itself in
absolutely
sometimes the most unusual ways, sometimes the most blatant ways. And then so if you don't mind kind of sharing a little bit from kind of that point to where you are now. So you obviously took your diploma at George Brown.
I did.
And then you worked at that employer, and then now you're doing something a little bit different, but similar.
Yes. So I was connected with an amazing employment advisor at this nonprofit, and she really helped me connect the dots where I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself at the time. As I mentioned, I had a really tough experience, and to be frank, I was really terrified to even work again. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and I didn't have, lacking in confidence and not having that career development background. I wasn't able to see and connect the dots on my resume, but she was. So she saw, you have a lot of experience in community engagement, because even in my undergrad, I worked as a food justice coordinator at the Center for Women and Trans People. I had a lot of volunteer experience, and it all involved community. And I studied women and gender studies, which is a specialized social science in a particular area. So she really helped me connect the dots, and I became I started to gain a lot more confidence in myself. And I joined a youth mentoring and networking program, met amazing mentors there who, sometimes we see these people who are like, wow, they're so successful. We think of them in a glass case, but they share, I went through so many ups and downs with my careers, and to see them on the other side really happy in their careers, it gave me a lot of hope. Right? And I think we should never underestimate the power of hope, even if it's a little shrivel. Mm-hmm. And so not long after I joined this youth mentoring program, I was actually hired to become the peer leader. So I got hired. I started leading my fellow peers in networking, and I was just coaching them. And come to think of it, I was also doing this for my friends. I was helping my friends get amazing jobs in their profession, like teaching ESL. I was coaching them on their confidence. I was helping with their interviews, and they saw it in me before I saw it in myself. They're like, "Wow, you're really good at this." I think you should go into coaching. At the time, I was like, not that confident. I was like, oh, I don't have my stuff together, la-di-da. But, just put one foot forward in front of the other, and loved what I was doing so much. Like, I think that's been lifelong for me. Like, coaching, encouraging, developing. Like, I initially went to school because I wanted to become a teacher, so I could encourage and inspire young people. And so I'm doing that now in a roundabout way. So that's when I decided to go to George Brown and do my career development practitioner studies, and gain my certification. And so I've been working in the field since 2018, working at a couple of nonprofits, leading youth mentoring programs, and I continue to do that now. But I've also gone entrepreneurial, which is another path I never thought I would pursue when I initially got into the field.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Thank you.
And if you'd love to share a little bit on the entrepreneurial path,
Sure.
I'd love to hear a little bit about that. Obviously, it's still in its kind of initial
Still in the
nascent
works.
Stages, but
Yes.
if you could share that would be great.
Well, I really give a lot of thanks to mentors that help me see my greatness, right? And I think we all need that. And every mentor and every coach needs a mentor and coach themselves. So initially when I started in the field, I thought, okay, yeah, I'm going to work at a nonprofit and I'm going to do employment advisory, and wow, I've made it. But I met amazing mentors who I didn't even know I was looking for them at the time, but just life connects you. It works in mysterious ways and just connects you with the best people that you need, that you didn't realize that you needed to help you grow and develop to become the person that you are. And I'm very honored and grateful to be in that position where I can be that for other people now as well. So I met an amazing mentor who took me under her wing, and she's also an entrepreneur, and she also saw it in me and encouraged it. And so I decided to, again, trust the process, not knowing what the outcome would be, but just, continue to follow that pull. And so I started off doing, a lot of volunteer opportunities. Like, people sought me out to come speak to their audiences. And over the pandemic, even you and I collaborated during the pandemic to bring what was formerly an in-person networking program and brought to online. So with that opportunity, I was able to use a lot of my creativity and basically operated as an entrepreneur during those unprecedented times when we all had to pivot. And so I was able to gain a lot of experience there. And I realized, I really enjoy this, being able to use my creative side, bring people together in community. And so I decided to take that leap of faith and invest in myself to help me grow in that entrepreneurial direction, which continues to this day.
Sounds good. So obviously a lot more in store and more to come in those veins. So
Thank you.
wondering if as we kind of wrap up the discussion,
Sure.
if you could share some of your SWIKE, the stuff I wish I knew earlier. I know you shared a lot, but maybe summarize a couple of those. So I know there was a couple like go and seek some career guidance, and obviously trust the processes in there, and then seek out mentors. Those were three. Are there more do you want to elaborate on, or the more that you want to share?
Ooh, oh my goodness, so much. It could probably be like a section of your book. And I really appreciate you creating these books. By the way, I have both of them, both of the SWIKE books.
Thank you for the support.
Of course. So stuff I wish I knew earlier. Well, believing in yourself, as cliche as it sounds, comes to mind. And this is always ongoing. I think, like so many others, I have a tendency to be really hard on myself. And it can be when I go through different challenges in life, right? There's always going to be challenges, new levels. And I think it's really important to have grace and compassion for ourselves. As I'm telling the audience this, I'm definitely telling myself. So I think that's one of the things that I wish I knew earlier, is to have more grace and compassion for myself. Especially when I was going through the challenges that I did. And so much of it was like, I was doing it for the very first time in my life. And all these things, like how to not just manage your time, but how to design your time, how to design your life. These are things that I didn't really grow up knowing. And I know many of us didn't either, because there's so many who grew up in like very chaotic type of environments, right? So one of the things that I wish I knew earlier that I just learned in the process is to have that grace and compassion for myself, especially when you're doing something, especially as a young person for the first time. It's so challenging because you're basically learning as you go. You're building the plane while flying it. And it can be a very tremendous and exhausting experience going through all of that. So
For sure.
that's one of the things I wish I knew earlier.
And I'm reminded of the system is not necessarily set up in your favor where as you go through school, you're expected perfection, right?
Oh,
you
gosh.
need the A plus, that sort of thing. And I don't know if you grew up with like kind of the B is an Asian fail, that sort of thing. So you have
A
to
plus or
strive
bus.
for the A plus.
Woo,
or bus,
which
basically,
really messes us up, like mentally, emotionally. I think so many of us, because of those high expectations and only having those types of high expectations to guide us, we get into the mindset of like just being so hard on ourselves when we fail at something. But what is failure? It's first attempt in learning. And sometimes it might happen over and over because there's more to learn, but to not take it into ourselves and make it mean something about ourselves. I think that's something that we need to be aware of because it's easy to, go down that downward spiral of guilt, shame, regret, so on and so forth. And that's where grace comes in as that balm.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I like that acronym, first attempt in learning, because I think the opposite side of the spectrum is like the only failure is giving up is really that, because you need to try and continue on, and then you'll eventually get better because more cliches, every expert started as an amateur or beginner, that sort of thing. So
10,000 hours, they say.
Yeah.
It's okay to suck at first. Like it's normal when you first start, like you're probably going to suck.
Yeah.
And suck a lot. And that's okay because you're just starting out. And I think what's most important is to not let the fear, cliche again, fear of failure, to stop us from even trying. And oftentimes it does. So just embracing and being okay with sucking at first. That's another thing that I would impart with the audience.
Yeah, and then one of the major reasons why cliches exist is because plenty of them are real and actually applicable to many folks. So I'm sure there's more to the story. We could probably dive deep into and meander a lot of these topics. But as we close off, I'd love if you can share a few kind of future aspirations that you have, and where can folks connect with you if they want to reach out?
Okay, so folks can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm most active on there. You can look me up easily. I'm Valerie Lay. Career confidence coach. And I'm, of course, friends with Lukey on there. So you will find me if you're also connected with him. And as for future aspirations, I'm seeing where this entrepreneurial path takes me, but I think the direction I want to take is continuing to offer, workshop facilitation, mentorship, guidance. I love talking about topics like networking because that's really what got me into the field, connecting with people, forming community. LinkedIn also has been so major in my career growth and development. So I love talking about that, offering group coaching, mentoring services, would love in the future, hey, maybe you and I will collaborate again. Love to create some public events that youth can attend and really get an amazing experience, like a summit, for example. Those are some dreams that I have, and maybe you'll want to come along with me and join.
Sure. I'm sure we can make that a reality. So thanks so much, Valerie.
You're very
for
welcome.
sharing the story. We'll obviously link all that stuff in the show notes, and hopefully have you back for a future episode.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lukey. I really appreciate you taking the time to invite me onto the podcast and share my story. And I hope that the conversation inspires so many in your audience.
Thanks so much, Valerie.
You're very welcome. You as well.
Thanks for joining us on the SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Lukidanu, Lukidanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.